What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Broke Man Finance. Today's video is not like the typical videos Adam and I have been doing in the past talking about stocks or finance, but instead I'm doing a video sharing with you my experience going through officer selection board. So like many of you, when I first started the step or the process of becoming an Air Force officer, I had to take the AFOQT. I bought my books, I studied as much as I could, I watched video after video on YouTube, trying to really get all the advice and tips and opinions from everyone who had previously taken the test, so that way would have really a better chance or better result after taking my test. So after I passed the test, obviously the next step is going through the officer selection board, or I refer to it in today's video as the interview. So just like the AFOQT, I started talking to friends, people that had recently went through the officer selection process and got commissioned. I looked on YouTube, I looked on Google, different tips, interview styles, interview questions, just to kind of get my mind in the direction of going through an extensive or an interview that I really haven't ever dealt with before. So when I first started looking on YouTube, I noticed there wasn't a lot of videos of people's experience going through the actual interview process. There was a lot of videos on the AFOQT or the OTS experience. So after I went through my interview process and was ultimately selected and was selected for a second lieutenant commission opportunity, I want to put this video together to share with you or share with someone that you may know that's going through the process that may be able to help you. If there's one or two things that I learned that can help the next person, that's what this video is about. So first of all, my experience going through it may be slightly different than others, and that being I'm currently enlisted. So if you're already enlisted, of course, when you go into the officer board, you're going to be wearing your dress blues compared to someone coming from college, may just be wearing a suit, dress shirt, and a tie. So when I was given my meeting location and the date and times that I was plugged into, I showed up to the meeting location, and the president of the board come out, which was a major, and she kind of walked me through the general process of how everything would go. A few minutes later, I walked in, I gave my reporting instructions, and I was seated in front of a three-person officer board. And on that board, there was a major, a captain, and a first lieutenant. You're basically several feet in front of them in a chair, and they was behind a table. And then as the interview started or the process started, they started asking questions, and they would each ask one or two questions, and the next person would ask one or two questions, and they'd kind of go back and forth until they asked all the questions that they was going to ask. So I'll be honest with you, some of the questions going into this took me by surprise, even though I thought a pretty good job of preparing for the interview. Again, I several friends and people that I know that recently went through the process and become commissioned. So I kind of I felt like a general idea going into it. But again, some of these questions wasn't your normal interview questions. And one of the questions I remember was, when as a leader have you been presented with an ethical dilemma, and how or what did you do to overcome that dilemma? One of the other questions was, what has been your greatest achievement in your career so far? And then the other one was, what has been your biggest mistake in your career so far? And then of course there was some regular interview questions, or interview questions you hear a lot, or if you go on Google, the typical interview questions that people ask, such as, why should we select you for this position? What have you done to prepare for this position? And then what are your strengths and weaknesses in relation to this position that you bring to the table? So keep in mind going into this, most of the questions, if not all, are going to be related to some type of leadership question. Again, you're going through to be selected as an Air Force officer, so as soon as you go through OTS, you're right smack into a leadership role that you're going to be experienced with. So they kind of ask these questions to kind of see what your mindset is, or what your mind is tracking towards as far as thinking of as a leader. So my interview questions, being prior enlisted, may be slightly different than those with no military experience, because someone from college may not have the leadership experience that as an NCO in the military that I've been presented with. So they may tailor the questions a little different, but in general, they're probably going to be related for leadership positions or leadership roles in the style questions they ask. So with that being said, keep in mind going into this interview, it doesn't matter if you have a lot of leadership experience or very limited leadership experience. Your life experience, whether it's in work, it's in school, if it's in sports, if it's in a community, whatever you have, someone has at one point probably been presented with a leadership position or a leadership scenario that you've had to work through or you've been a part of a team with. So utilizing those experiences in your life and relating those to a leadership role or a leadership trait is going to be very beneficial as you go through this interview process and kind of tie in those and use those your life experience as a parallel to the questions they may be asking. So here's one of the biggest things I learned from it. Talking to other officers and then what I perceived or what I took from the interview process for me personally. Obviously, they're not asking questions that warrant a yes or no answer. They want to ask open-ended questions to see how you are able to think under pressure and how you're able to articulate your experiences in relation to those questions. Keep in mind that everyone that's coming to this has a different experience. They have a different background, so no one's answer is going to be the same, but it's again how you walk them through your answers and how you're able to sell yourself or convince them that you have every quality that the Air Force needs in their future officers. So the whole process, the interview to me is one of the most important because you're having to sell yourself, you're having to convince multiple strangers who you've never met before, that never met you, that in a matter of an hour or less, that you're the best thing that the United States Air Force needs against all the other candidates that they're interviewing. So with that being said, everyone's coming in with a degree. Everyone's coming in with a passing AFOQT score. So being able to really wow them in your confidence, in your leadership abilities, and your experience to be able to articulate how you would handle these scenarios or how you did handle these scenarios in the past is crucial in being able to win over and convince them to select you against all the others. So being able to convince them takes several things. One, you have to go in there not being cocky, but you have to be confident in yourself, and this shows through your body language, your preparedness. You go to get that confidence. You have to study just like you did AFOQT. You have to study, expose yourself to tough questions that you normally wouldn't answer, and then getting your friends, your coworkers, your current supervisors to ask you these questions and to be able to articulate to them in a professional and a intelligent mindset on how you would handle or how you did handle these scenarios. Because a lot of times it's easy to think about something, what you would say in your mind, but then when you're in front of a group of strangers and you know they're grading you and they're writing stuff down as you're talking, it can mess people up, the anxiety of it, the nerves of it. So walking through several times with people that are going to critique you harder than strangers will, normally your friends or coworkers, are going to be harder on you or say, I wouldn't say this, I wouldn't say that, or this sounded intelligent. You started rambling on this section. So having that practice does make perfect on some things. It's going to give you that experience of talking to them, or video yourself answering these questions yourself, and go back and watch it, and you'll see your body language, you'll see how you pronounce certain words, and you'll be able to really critique yourself and ultimately prepare yourself. Because once you prepare and once you have that confidence going into that, even though you don't have a little bit of nerves, you don't have a little bit of anxiety, it's normal, it's the way of life, you're going to get through it a lot easier and a lot better, and you're going to come out of the interview feeling a lot more confident in yourself, which is ultimately is going to carry over, and they're going to perceive that. They know if people's nervous, they know if people know what they're talking about, and they can tell when people are being confident and they have that positive mental attitude going into that, and it carries over. And that's a big thing that, from my experience talking to officers, they look at and they grade is how confident is the person, not necessarily the answers they're given, but the body language and how they're showcasing themselves as a future leader. Guys, I hope this video helps you if you're about to go through the Air Force Officer Selection Board, or if you know someone that's going through the board themselves. As always, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel out, and or subscribe button. And if you've already went through the process, or if you have some tips, or if you heard some people going through the process in the past, feel free by all means to put those comments, those tips and advice in the comment sections to help the next person out, or even if somebody's scrolling through, if there's something I didn't cover in the video, they may read those comments and may help them as they go through their process. And as always, we'll see you on the next video.